Whether you operate one forklift or thousands, one location or hundreds, the new My Toyota customer portal can help you optimize your operation and material handling equipment. This one-stop, free-to-use platform is designed to help you take control of your information and make smarter decisions, all at the touch of a button. Register and access your data today at my.toyotaforklift.com. That's my.toyotaforklift.com. Hello, and thank you for being a listener. Before we get into the episode, I wanted to let you know about a special offer being given to the new warehouse listener. That's you. Mobile Robot Guide is offering 10% off just for you when you purchase the Warehouse Solutions Buyer's Guide. Just use promo code WarehousePod10 at mobilerobotguide.com. That's WarehousePod10. This is your comprehensive guide for all things autonomous mobile robots. That's WarehousePod10. And for more info, go to thenewwarehouse.com.
The New Warehouse Podcast, hosted by Kevin Lawton, is your source for insights and ideas from the distribution, transportation, and logistics industry. A new episode every Monday morning brings you the latest from industry experts and thought leaders. And now, here's Kevin.
Hey, it's Kevin Lawton with the New Warehouse Podcast, bringing you a new episode today. On today's episode, I am joined by John Conte. He is the founder and CEO of Conte Logistics and also was recently hired as Director of Product Management for Digital Commerce and Fulfillment at IKEA, which I believe is a new department, and he's heading it up. So we're going to talk to John today a little bit about his background and kind of his journey through supply chain career, really focused on logistics and transportation and how he kind of got to where he is now. We're going to touch a little bit on his book he recently wrote for kids, actually, ABCs of Supply Chain. And we're going to talk a little bit about TMS. He is somewhat of a TMS expert, I guess. He actually did a PDM presentation for my Apex chapter, talking about TMS, and we're going to go into kind of TMS 101, how do you select one, and how implementation goes and things of that nature. So, John, welcome to the show. How are you?
Hey, thank you very much. I'm happy to be here. I'm doing well. How's everything going on your side?
Doing all right. So why don't you give the listeners a little sense of kind of your background and a couple experiences, and talk to me too about like how did you get into this recent position with IKEA as well?
Yeah, sure. So I'll go way back to when I was 18 years old, right. And like most 18-year-olds, it's you kind of, your senior year, you kind of don't know what you're going to do with your life. And, there's the opportunity for college and then work, all these things you're balancing out. And back then it was the year 2000, it was typically just pushed right into college. Right. Yeah. So I actually went to college. I did a couple semesters for criminal justice and said, this isn't for me.
Interesting.
And I kind of just took a break from school, and went and I got a job at a warehouse. And that's really where all this logistics and supply chain stuff started to come together for me. I did typical jobs of forklift driving and picking orders and receiving and all those features that you would typically see in those style jobs. But I always knew, there's probably a better way to do this stuff. There's better processes and all of that. So then I decided, after some time, hey, I should probably go to college. I should probably learn the fundamentals of this stuff. So, I ended up enrolling in a bachelor's program for logistics and transportation management. And during that time, took more responsibility on in different, positions and things like that. And then ended up, getting my bachelor's degree. And then I rolled right into a master's program with Rutgers for supply chain management. And in between all of that, other certifications, opportunities come up. Like I went through the whole Six Sigma process and got my black belt. And the really cool thing, in my opinion, is when you're doing that and working, you can actually apply the stuff you're learning in the moment. like I've literally like had times where it's like I learned something new, reading chapters 7 through 14, right, and doing a discussion post or something, and then it's like the next day it's like I can implement this, like I can do this stuff. Plus you get to learn from other people, right, other working adults, in my opinion, which are really cool. So you get to hear some like different perspectives, or they've already experienced that. So anyway, career progressed as my education did and that sort of thing. And I ended up for 10 years in the automotive industry, the last 10 years of my life. And that was great. And it was, automotive is very flashy on the front end to customers, right? You hear about, all these electrification and OEMs and connected vehicles, and that's great. But the behind the scenes of how they get, parts distributed, vehicles distributed is super archaic.
Yeah. A lot of parts, right?
So it was a lot of parts. Yeah. and just a lot of movement, right? They're using air and rail and vessel, and I mean, every mode you could possibly think of. So at the end of the day, when it comes to a customer, you have to be able to make sure you have that final mile completely locked down, completely transparent, because all the work it took just to say get a vehicle into the customer's hands can all get thrown out the window if it doesn't deliver on the day it's supposed to, right? Imagine buying an $80,000 truck and you're waiting for it, and then the day you're supposed to pick it up from the dealership, it's not here, right? Not going to be too happy about that. So anyway, learned a lot over those 10 years, was able to put a lot of really cool projects in place and a lot of cool things together. And then, had an opportunity during all of that, to start my own company, which was great, which was Conte Logistics Consulting. And that was really set up with the intention of helping small to medium-sized businesses, get transportation management into their supply chain, right? Figure out what system do I need, because there's wants and needs, right? And sometimes, you can need certain things, but the TMS, services will sell you on wants, right? Gotcha. And you might not actually need them, right? And you'll spend a lot of money to do so. So having a third-party advocate like myself to be able to stand back and say, okay, listen, I know this stuff sounds great, but right now you just need these things, and this is what your budget is. So let me help guide you through that, right? And then, freight and parcel negotiation, there's a lot of small to medium-sized businesses that kind of don't understand everything it takes to make up pricing. So they could be leaving some money on the table. There could be opportunities for better service. Again, it all kind of ties in together, because as a shipper, you want to put all these carriers into like a bidding environment, right? 3PLs included in that. Sometimes they are really helpful, and then sometimes they can kind of be a hindrance. They can add costs. So it all depends on what the business model is. So anyway, I had started that company for that reason, and it was, it's fun. I get to meet a lot of really cool business owners. I get to hear about a lot of different just supply chains and customers and practices and things like that, and then help them optimize. And then, I was very lucky to get an opportunity with IKEA. IKEA started a digital group in the United States, and it's all about just getting to market quicker, giving a better customer experience, helping customers get product, in a faster manner. So I was sold, when IKEA had reached out to me and started talking to me about what they were trying to do, and how supply chain and logistics was so integral to what they were trying to do. I was sold. Very cool company, great culture. And for me, it was like, I want to be a part of that. So I joined in September, the end of September. So I've been with them about 5 weeks now. So I'm still learning a lot as I go. But it's been an amazing journey so far.
All right, cool. And congratulations on your new role, of course.
Thank you.
I'm curious, actually, so you started out, as you said, your interest for this kind of work and industry, I guess, came from actually working in the warehouse, driving forklifts and things of that nature. So how has that kind of hands-on experience, you think, maybe given you maybe an upper hand in your career versus maybe some guys that just come out of college with not really having that kind of experience?
Yeah, that's a great question, because I think it's huge, right? I've seen both sides of it, right? So for me, it's when you're going to implement something, when you get into a leadership role, and you're involved in strategy and things like that, and when all the executives, you're sitting in a room, you start talking about what you want to do over the next 5 years, and you want to implement these technologies, and you want to go with autonomous forklifts or whatever it might be, right? A lot of times people fail to forget that there are people doing these jobs, right? And you can't just walk out onto the warehouse floor and say, hey, starting tomorrow, this is happening.
Yes.
Right?
It's not that easy.
And, you're going to have, it's not going to be good, right? There's a change management proponent that's involved in all of that, and it needs to be handled properly, and there needs to be visibility, and you need to talk about that stuff. And when it comes to, forklift drivers, warehouse associates, whatever you call them, truck drivers, your frontline people that are doing the bulk of the work that's generating revenue for the company, right? Receiving the product in, inventory accuracy, picking it, shipping it out, all those things. I think it's important to walk the walk and know what they do and know what their job is. If you're going to be a leader over that group, if you're going to be an analyst over that group and you want to start to make some changes, you really need to know what their job is and how they do their job. And you need to be able to listen to their recommendations, because a lot of times they're long tenured employees and they've been around and they've seen things get executed and either pass or fail. So they have some really good history and some knowledge. So I think it's huge if you have that background and you have that practical understanding and knowledge. I just visited a distribution center the other day for IKEA, and as I walked through there, I understand what's happening, with the forklift drivers and the warehouse guys, and they're picking, and it's what's going on, and it's not a foreign language. And I think it's important to have that background. And look, if you go a traditional route and you go to high school and you enroll in college and you go through your college career and you're lucky enough to not have to work, right? And you're fortunate enough to be able to just focus on school and do all of that. If you come out into the workforce and you go into an environment where there are warehouses and you're going to be attached to that, it makes a lot of sense for you to just get out there and learn what they're doing and learn what's happening and shadow the warehouse managers or the operations managers, whatever they're titled. Spend a day working the front line, spend a couple days doing that, of understanding what it takes to pick an order, and maybe jump on a forklift if they'll allow you in an OSHA safe environment. And just see what that life is like. It's always good to understand. And again, just from a leadership perspective, you gain a lot of respect from the people that you'll be managing if they see you, talk the talk and walk the walk. So I think it's important to do that. But I think it's really valuable to have that experience. I mean, just understanding and knowing what's going on out in the warehouses is huge. So for me, I think it was an upper hand, to be honest, because you have that, mix of, you have the practical knowledge and it, and then you also have all the school credentials behind you. So I think for anybody that's kind of in that boat, I think you're in a great place.
Yeah, I totally agree too. From my experience too. I mean, it makes such a difference, and even when you're looking at, like you said, implementing new things and all these different things, there's so many little kind of intricacies in the process that you don't necessarily understand from a higher level unless you've actually kind of done it or you've kind of been with the person that's doing it every day, and that's the best way to get that insight. So definitely good information there. So you also, somewhere in between here, you also wrote a book, right? So I think it's called The ABCs of Supply Chain. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So that actually came out of, a couple of years ago, I had linked up with Rowan Burlington County College, and they had a supply chain program, not a degree program, but I believe it was called Links, and it was funded by the state of New Jersey. Okay. And it was really a grant given to them to get people certificates, right? They could be working adults. Maybe you're a forklift driver. You want something to build up your resume. You're ready to take that step into a supervisor role or your next position. So anyway, they had created this program, and I ended up doing a career day type of thing where I was speaking on behalf of an organization I used to work for and talking about the supply chain opportunities that we had. From there, I was asked if I would be interested in being on the Transportation Logistics Advisory Board, which I said, yeah, that sounds awesome. and it was people from, at the time, Jet.com and New Jersey Department of Transportation and Rowan College and Burlington Chamber of Commerce and a lot of surrounding towns and schools, and there was even some high school representation there. So the interesting thing was, like, how do you drive? I remember one of our sessions was all around, like, how do you drive, engagement with the younger generation? Like right now, people going into college kind of know what supply chain is, right? They might see the word on the side of a FedEx van or see a commercial. It was really funny. I just saw, Kamala Harris in a, political commercial and talking about how we need to get the supply chain right for the United States. And I'm like, when did you ever hear a politician talk about supply chain?
She's talking about us.
Right? She's talking about us, right? So it's super cool. So I feel like right now there's a lot more marketing around it, right? So people are going into college and they're like, I'm going for supply chain. They kind of get it, right? But even at that generation below them, earlier high school, grade school, middle school, they don't know, right? And I feel like there's still this like back office connotation of, if you go into supply chain or logistics, all you're doing is driving a forklift, or all you're doing is working in a warehouse, right? And they don't realize that you could utilize data science and business intelligence and analytics and IT and engineering and all these different things that you would get a traditional degree out of, you can use in the supply chain and logistics world. So anyway, it got me thinking. And then I started to do some research, and I started looking. I'm like, you know what? There's like nothing out there really for younger kids. Like, there's stuff about being a doctor and being, all these other things. But there's nothing out there that just even gives them a glimpse into like what supply chain could be. So the idea became almost like an ABC style book, right? Where each letter of the alphabet represents something related to supply chain, right? So B, bill of lading, right? And then C, common carrier, and just different things like that, right? So anyway, I created that, published it. It's available on Amazon and on the Conte Logistics website. And, the idea behind it was for the younger generation, but then also as, a topic of discussion, right? If you have it on your desk in your office, to be given away, to high school kids, to be given away, as promotional gifts and things like that. So, it's been really cool. I've gotten some really good feedback from some parents that have purchased the book for their kids. I made a connection with one of the PhD leads at Penn State. He bought it for his daughter. He's like, hey, I stumbled on this. He's like, I think this is great. He's like, he's got a PhD in supply chain management. He's like, I've never seen anything meant for early education before. So, the idea behind it was just to help push our industry forward and, hopefully, we create a whole little mini generation of kids that want to be drone pilots to do delivery and autonomous forklift drivers and things like that. So,
Yeah, very cool. I mean, it's a great idea, and I've never seen anything like it either. And I think, it's very interesting. You touched on, kind of engaging the younger generation in supply chain. And like you said, it's very much the idea of, it's just a warehouse, right? It's like this concrete walls with boxes inside, and that's pretty much it. But there's so much more that goes into it, and there's a lot of cool stuff happening too now with automation and robotics as well. So it's good to try and give them some exposure earlier. And I think even, like you said, with, the pandemic and all this stuff, supply chain has kind of become like this talked about thing, like in the news cycle, like when we're out of toilet paper and all this stuff, like, everybody's like, supply chain. So, so it's cool to be getting into the hands of younger kids. So it's really cool stuff. And we'll definitely put a link to where people can buy it on newwarehouse.com as well. So let's get into TMS, right? Because that's kind of your strong thing, right? Conte Logistics, focusing on getting companies TMS and all that stuff. But let's start out, I guess, high level. What is TMS? Like, give us the TMS 101. What is TMS, and why do I need a TMS?
We'll be back after a quick break.
You hear a lot about supply chains these days, because if the past couple years have taught us anything, it's that an efficient, well-managed supply chain is absolutely critical to keeping businesses successful and consumers happy. I'm Will Haywood, and I host a podcast called All Business, No Boundaries, where we talk about supply chains, how they work, what happens when they don't, and the innovations that are redefining what's possible in the world of logistics. Join me for insightful interviews with thought leaders and industry experts. We discuss how optimizing supply chains can break down the barriers that are holding businesses back. That's All Business, No Boundaries by DHL Supply Chain. Listen and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
Yeah, so at the highest level, TMS is basically a transportation management platform.
Right.
It's a system that allows you to ship stuff, right? That's the easiest way to put it, right? So people say, okay, well, I have one because I use the FedEx computer or I use the UPS computer. That's old school terminology, right? Because they would literally give you hardware with their software loaded onto it. But at the end of the day, you were kind of locked into just one carrier, right? It was FedEx on that terminal or UPS on that terminal. And if you wanted a competitive rate, you had to jump on both terminals and see what the difference was, right? And then you had larger organizations over the years come out with products, right? Like Microsoft, in their AX system, they had something called Trax, which was kind of like a TMS system, where it allowed you to connect with some carriers and see some rating and stuff like that, and book shipments. Then you have your Oracles and your SAPs. And over time, they were kind of your legacy systems, and they were very expensive, very hard to implement, and you needed a robust IT team on the back end to really help you because you had to handle all the integrations yourself, right? And then, just like anything, over the last 10 years, you start to get, a lot of really cool startups that started using cloud-based services and really taking advantage of API integrations and saying, wait a minute, we can give a platform to people. And if they have a login to the website that they use to ship, FedEx, UPS, any freight carrier you can think of, as long as they have the connection capabilities, they can log in themselves, connect, and start shipping. And they'll see their rates. They'll start getting status, back and forth. They can print labels. They can print bill of ladings. They can start to do all of that stuff. So that really evolved. And then, in my opinion, just like took off like crazy in the last 3 to 5 years, because then you started to see more and more technology start to get utilized and more companies started to get into the game and offer more services. And, you can have subscription-based services where you just pay per month. They're not like a 3PL model. Now, there are 3PLs that do offer TMS platforms as well. So you really have to know what you're looking for and what you're getting into. I always say there's the shipper-powered TMS, which is essentially, like Cubics, right? Where they're not marking up your rates. They're your carriers with your rates. They're giving you the platform and all the bells and whistles that come with that, right? But then there could be a carrier that has their own TMS, and then there could be 3PLs that have their own TMS, and you're using basically their marked up rates, right? Now, you might still get great pricing because they're buying, freight in volume, and they pass that back to you. But that could be a good solution if you just don't have the time to go and negotiate, carrier contracts and all that kind of stuff. If you don't have the time, I would say outsource it to a company like Conte Logistics Consulting.
Yeah, we know somebody, right? We know a guy.
Right, we know somebody, yeah. But no, at the end of the day, a TMS is essentially, a tool for you to utilize to be able to ship your product. But the goal behind that would be to have multiple carriers in that system that really are your own rates, and you can see all of your pricing competitively per shipment, right? It gives you the opportunity to book and track your shipment. It gives you all the data and analytics behind the scene. And I can tell you that those data points and all the analytics behind it are super helpful, because it now gives you the ability to see things like, am I shipping in zone or out of zone? Meaning, do I have a location where I should put a warehouse, or should I remove a warehouse? Do I have redundant warehouses and I really don't need that overhead? You'll see things like, hey, in this particular area, carrier A never delivers on time, but they're amazing in these other areas. Maybe I need to find another carrier in this area, right? Maybe I'm owed back some money because they didn't deliver by their promise date, right? And my customer never complained, so I never knew. It gives you a really great way to control if you have multiple distribution centers. Maybe you start to find one that's always picking the most expensive carrier. And you don't really know why, but you can see the cost, right? So you can drill down and focus on that DC and say, hey, what's going on here? some TMS platforms will allow you to invoice audit, right? So your invoices will come in automatically, bounce up against everything you shipped and what you were quoted at, and either say, yep, it passes, or no, it fails. You need to look at the reasons why. So it can do a lot of things, a TMS platform. And at the end of the day, again, at the highest level, I always say, like, it's basically like your Travelocity for shipping, right?
Okay. Mm-hmm.
That's like the easiest way to explain it to most people is like, hey, it's like Travelocity. Like, you know where you want to go, you just don't know where you're going to stay. So in my opinion, it's like, you know what you're going to ship, you just don't know what carrier you want to use. And everybody has different reasons, right? Maybe you want it to get there early in the morning. Maybe you need it there in 2 hours. Maybe you can take 5 days. Right? It all depends. So the system will give you all of those options and very quickly. And you don't necessarily need a lot of IT involvement on the startup. Now, it all depends on what you want to do as a business too. Do you want to integrate into your WMS? Do you want to integrate into your ERP? Do you have e-com? So it all depends. The more complicated the business gets, then obviously, the more expense comes into play and the more IT power and all that sort of thing. But that's what I would say to people. If you don't know what a TMS is, I would say it, basically just think of like a Travelocity for shipping. Right. And just think of, having the ability to, control your supply chain at your fingertips.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a really good, I like the analogy of the Travelocity. But I think it's a really good look to at what a TMS is, not only because some people I think may look at the TMS and just think about how it's managing the transportation, like in the current, right? But you also mentioned how you can see these different things that are happening, like, maybe you have redundancy, like you said, or maybe you have somewhere where you could use actually a warehouse that actually would benefit you. So I think there's a lot of other things to it than just like, okay, selecting the right carrier, like today, right?
Yeah.
You got all these things that can help you in the future. Yeah. Yeah. So I'm happy that you pointed that out. So I'm curious, and, obviously Conte Logistics, you mentioned one of the things that you're focused on is helping companies select the right TMS. So how do you go about selecting one? What's a way to kind of look at the different options out there, and how do you find, I guess, like you said, those needs versus the wants, right?
Yeah. So basically, I mean, it's conversational, really. I mean, there's no real magic science behind it other than sitting down and understanding and learning what the business is, right? So the best way to do that is to sit down with the decision makers of that company, and you basically hear what their pain points are, right? What is a TMS going to solve for you, right? Typically, if they don't have one, it's pretty standard where, well, we don't know what we're going to spend before, until we get the invoice, right? Once it leaves the building, we got to use multiple systems to track, right? So maybe I'm just a small company, maybe they ship 50 things a day, right? And maybe, 35 of those things are parcel, and maybe the rest might be LTL, right? Or more of it's parcel and there's some LTL. But maybe those parcels went a mixture of USPS, FedEx, UPS, right? Maybe they did a couple internationals with DHL, and then they shipped one or two things with a major carrier, and then one with a smaller mom and pop style carrier or something like that, right? Now you have to track this stuff, right? Maybe you're getting phone calls. Hey, where's my stuff? Hey, it didn't deliver or whatever. Yeah. So now you're like, oh, well, it shipped out of this warehouse. Let me call them. Hey, how did this ship? Oh, let me go to the filing cabinet and get the bill of lading, that sort of thing. Yeah. Or there's some kind of centralized spreadsheet. But at the end of the day, you're still taking that information and jumping on the websites and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, we would just walk through what are the pain points, right? Where are the areas that a TMS is really going to help you? And what you'll start to find is what sometimes sounds like it's going to be, we just need help with tracking. Well, what you'll find is there's a lot of cost tied up into your tracking process, right? Multiple administrative people, redundancies, pulling information out of websites and entering them into an ERP, and all of that could be done through connections, right? Through all IT solutions and connections that are pretty standard in most well put together TMS platforms. That's like out of the box stuff you would get. But yeah, sit down, talk it out. What are you looking for? And then I always like to ask, like, okay, once we get this accomplished, what would you like to see behind that? So I always look for what are the needs for now, right? Because I want to show value right away and I want them to take advantage of it as quickly as possible. But then what's your wish list after that? Well, it'd be great if the system could do this, that, or the other. It's like, okay, well, that's good to know, because I don't want to align you to a system that can only do what you're asking for today, and they can't scale up and do what you want for the tomorrow. A really good thought around that, or case study is, or example really, is if you have your own fleet too, right? Okay. So imagine a company that has their own fleet of, just say, 200 trucks, right? 26-foot box trucks maybe. You can really start to get into some cool stuff where, if you have telematics in your trucks, and if not, we'll help you with that too. Yeah. But if you have telematics in your trucks, some TMS platforms can take that data in as well, right? So then you start to get into some really cool things where it's like, well, okay, we can figure out your cost per mile and what it actually costs to deliver on your truck. And then we can start to see, hey, anytime you go out into these regions, you're losing money because it's too far out. And you could actually see the cost of shipping with an LTL carrier and your own truck. And you'll start to make those decisions, to say, hey, it doesn't make sense to put it on my truck. An LTL carrier will get it out there in one day anyway. Right. So I could pay $100 or whatever and just ship it LTL versus paying, $127 by the time I'm done with fuel and driver and maintenance and benefits and all the things that go into running my own fleet. Right. And you can start to see savings that way too. And maybe some even better customer experience type stuff, because maybe the LTL gets it there earlier in the morning when, your truck won't get there until later in the afternoon. And then your truck's running empty on the back end. And all that kind of stuff. So you can avoid that whole situation, but you wouldn't have known, right? Unless you had some kind of tool in front of you. So anyway, that's just another benefit of the TMS, but it's something that some companies could look at as well. It's like, hey, we want to get our arms around, all of the transportation service providers we use, and that's the short term. But then it's like, hey, well, if you have your own fleet, let's maybe look at a TMS that can help you actually, manage your routes. And we could start to do a competitive analysis in the future to say, does it make sense to use my truck or not? Right. It might make sense to not use the truck. So that's kind of the process. It's all just very collaborative, very relaxed. Just I like to learn too. So to me, it's so cool. There's all these different businesses that exist out here. And, even in our own backyard in Philly, Jersey, Delaware area, it's like, you don't know. You drive through industrial parks, and it's like some of these companies, you kind of don't know what they do. And then you hear what they do. It's like, man, that is so cool. Like, I didn't even know that existed. So
and you don't even know, like, some of the bigger companies that are so well known around the globe is like, oh, there's a warehouse like 10 miles away. No idea.
Right.
So it's pretty interesting, the whole world, and I like the kind of the approach and the idea to selecting one of kind of making conversational and really figuring out what you need, not only right now to solve your issues, but also for future growth and scaling as well. So I think that's really important. I'm curious, with the, there's WMS, TMS, YMS, all these different systems. So where, if you're working on optimizing your operation, right? And maybe, like you said, you focus on smaller, medium-sized businesses. So, a lot of times maybe there's like a dated system that they're using in the warehouse or something like that. Do you think that the focus should be on optimizing with WMS first, or TMS, YMS? Where do you think each one kind of falls in the, process to making yourself go to that next level?
Yeah, I think it all comes down to just analyzing each one and seeing where, how to prioritize, which system to look at first to either replace or to just kind of put it in the totem pole list, right? So it kind of all depends. Like if you're spending, tons of money on transportation, and that is, outweighing, any cost associated to your WMS, it makes sense to go TMS first, right? Yard management systems sometimes. So it's interesting you brought up yard management, because in a lot of the TMS platforms, yard management is another component or module that you can add on. And you are starting to see some TMSs really even start to branch into, WMS, Some of them have started to integrate with the NetSuites of the world or the AXs of the world and other traditional ERPs or WMSs. So eventually, I think, in my opinion, I think a TMS is going to end up being like a full suite of services where you can manage it all, right? Because today, if you connect a TMS with an ERP, it's basically pulling all of that info out of the WMS, right, to fill an order that feeds into the TMS platform. So why not just have another module in there that can do that? But I think, it goes down to, again, listening to what the customer needs are, hearing what it is. If I had a customer say to me, I really want a TMS, but my warehouse management software is all over the place and we don't love it. And then I got equipment out in the yard and there's forklifts and there's trailers and there's bobcats and there's all these different things. And I got to get my arms around that. I might start to look at maybe a platform that encompasses a little bit of all of that, right? A yard management, container tracking, that's huge, right? And if there's a platform out there that can do all of that, let's look at them, right? But if a WMS is, not up to par, we got to ask the whys, right? And figure out like what's going on with it. Was it a homegrown system? Is it an outdated, unsupported system now? What is out there that's comparable, and is there a cloud-based solution for WMS that we can move to? I would ask all those questions, and again, learn. Non-COVID, I'd try to come on site as much as possible. Even with COVID, if they have safety precautions in place and they're okay with having outsiders come in, I would go on site and we would do the demos and we would read up on all the pain points. And at the end of the day, it's all about creating what I call like the supply chain logistics ecosystem, right? What systems are going to work together and complement one another. At the end of the day, you don't want systems that are just sitting around and you're not using any of the features in there and you just have it because you have it, right? Or the person before you wanted it and bought it and now you came in. So at the end of the day, for me, it's all about this ecosystem and how does everything work together? Your carriers, parcel, LTL, truckload, all of that. And then your equipment that you have, how does that flow back in? Do you have telematics on your forklifts? Do you know what your forklifts are doing? Do you know, how many hours are being spent on your forklifts? What their charge levels are, like all of that sort of thing. Even sustainability practices come into play, right? Because a lot of smaller, medium-sized businesses are still running like propane, forklifts inside of a building, right? Which is always like odd to do stuff like that, right? And then you got these tanks outside and you got all these, OSHA requirements that come down on that. So at the end of the day, that's even an opportunity to say, hey, well, if you had electric lifts, we could have those in your system and you'd be able to monitor those as well. And one, it'd be better for, the environment. Two, it's cleaner and healthier for your employees. But three, they, are a little bit more robust. They can handle a little bit more, they have more torque and things like that. So, all three systems tie in together. It's just where they fit in. And then at the end of the day, is there one system we can use that replaces all three, right? And you just have one platform. So it all just comes down to the list of, issues, challenges, concerns, the nice haves. And then we'll work through it and go through it all. But I am seeing more and more TMS platforms start to kind of blur the line a little bit and become warehousing. You can put the square footage of your warehouse in here and your pallet sizes and rack spacing, and then it can tell you how much it can fit in and all that stuff, because it's similar to like load planning in a truck, right? When you think about it, you have a 53-foot truck, you can only fit so much stuff in there by either weight or dimension. So a lot of these TMS platforms have that feature, so for them they can build those same rules and constraints for a building. Right.
The building is just another truck, I guess, right?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. When you think about it like that, it's the same way. So, so that was a long-winded answer to your question, but I think, that's the way to do it.
Yeah. I think, there's a lot of great insights that you've given us here about TMS and, obviously your experience shows. And I think that, you can help people kind of guide them through, maybe avoiding some mistakes. So I'm curious, last question before we wrap up here, what, from your experience, what would you recommend not to do when implementing a TMS? There's a lot of, I think, people get excited about a new system and, oh, we can do this and we can do that. And then, sometimes they may misstep from the excitement. So what's some things that I guess maybe you would caution and recommend being aware of not to do when pursuing something like this?
Yeah, I would say everybody gets excited, like you said, right? Because you've gone through all the demos and you've probably gone through legal, and it took forever to get things signed, but you're ready to go, right? Don't be so ambitious that if the project fails, meaning if you have multiple distribution centers, it's okay to roll one out and then another, right? And learn through each implementation, because each one of your locations, although the system's going to be the same, you're going to have different people working there. You're going to have fans of the system and champions, and you're going to have people that don't want to see it succeed. And it's just, I'm just being honest, because they don't like the system. They don't like the change. They weren't involved in the decision, right? Because you can only have so many decision makers involved, So I will say it's the change management piece that is the toughest, in my opinion. Don't try to turn on every feature at once. Figure out a literal MVP, a minimum viable product. What is it that you need to keep the lights on and running now? And then behind the scenes, start to turn on more. If you try to turn on every module all at once, it's just too much to handle, in my opinion. You got to figure out what are those 3 to 5 things you want right away and turn those on, because you're going to be turning on things like invoice auditing, right? And payments. Now you have your whole accounting group involved in that, right? You're going to be turning on, your rating engine and optimization. So all your carrier reps are going to be involved, and you're going to be looking to make sure the system's communicating properly to the carrier and you're getting your confirmation numbers back and all that kind of stuff. Even something simple as having pro numbers loaded into the system. So when your bill of ladings print, they have a pro number on there. They're geographic by design. So you need a block of pro numbers for every distribution center you have, right? So, you can't just use pro numbers from New Jersey if you're in Michigan. You have to so all those little things, right? And, there's training that's going to come into play, right? So you want your supervisors or your location managers to be super users, right? And then you're going to have people underneath that. So I would always say you really have to plan it out. If it's a multi-DC operation, you have to plan it out. If you have 3PLs involved and then you have product in 3PL warehouses, you can still utilize them with a TMS. You can centrally manage it. But at the end of the day, they have to realize you're going to be emailing them your bill of lading, right? They're not going to select the carrier anymore. You're going to use your carrier. So there's things that come into play, like, even at the carrier level, when the driver comes in, they might not realize there's already a pro number on the bill of lading, and they might stick a pro number over top of it. Now they just broke your link for tracking. Right? So all these little things go into it. So there's education all around. So I would say, start slow. Don't bite off more than you can chew. You'll see wins relatively quickly, so you can keep building on top of those, but you don't need to go like fire hose style and just turn it all on, because it's going to be way too much to handle, and things are going to slip through. And again, the whole point to a TMS is to get data and visibility to be able to make business decisions. So you want to kind of focus on areas first, right? And it's like maybe you just get everybody using it just to ship stuff out, right? We didn't even get into inbound shipping and inbound management and portals for vendors, and you could do all this stuff, right? And really control the inbound, the outbound, dock scheduling, and all of that kind of stuff. But bare minimum, turn it on for parcel and freight, right? And just let that happen, right? And watch it, start to build reports behind the scenes on carrier scorecarding and start to see where your costs are. And relatively quickly, you'll start to see, hey, my one location out here in Ohio, they keep giving the highest cost carrier free. Why are they doing that? It gets there in the same time. I could be saving $100 on every shipment. Well, then you start to find out that maybe that carrier just brings them pizza once a month, right? so the guys and girls in the warehouse are like, oh, I'll just give him the work because this is what they do, right? You can shut all that down. All that will happen. But if you turn on so much at once, you won't have the focus. You won't be able to do that. So that's what I say. That's kind of my opinion, and that comes out of experience. trying to turn on too much at once and that sort of thing. And, at the end of the day, it's better to just roll it out slowly. If there's sister companies involved, if there's acquisitions involved, things like that, that's a whole nother element of complexity, because now you have to maybe get this system into that company, and maybe they already have a system, right? So, a lot of schmoozing goes on there to try to get your system in. But at the end of the day, if you're one enterprise, you want everybody shipping out of one system. So,
exactly.
Yeah, but start slow. Utilize resources. If it's a really good TMS provider, they're going to give you some resources to help you with implementation. They're not going to leave you on an island. They're going to be there to help you, walk you through, give you whatever you need. I mean, if they want it to be a successful long-term partnership, that's what they're going to do.
Right.
If it's one where after you sign on the dotted line or pay them their first month, you don't hear from them anymore, that's an issue. Yeah. So, that's not a good sign. So, and I always look to make sure I align any of my clients with, vendors that I know personally, sometimes in a way where it's like, hey, look, these people are going to be with you. They're going to stick through. They're going to be there at 2:00 in the morning. If you pick up the phone and call them, they're going to answer. So those are the types of businesses I like to, marry up together. So.
Definitely. All right. Great insight. Definitely good tips there on TMS. So, John, I want to thank you for coming on the show. How can people find out more information about Conte Logistics and get in touch with you?
Yeah, so you can go on the website, ConteLogisticsConsulting.com. You can just Google that. LinkedIn, you can either look me up personally on LinkedIn, which is John Conte, and then you could also look up Conte Logistics on LinkedIn. And my phone number's out there, my email's out there. There's chat features on the website, stuff like that. So, but yeah, if anybody ever, needs anything, even just a question, I'm always here to answer. It's not one of those types of consulting businesses where, I charge you and that sort of thing. I just like helping. I'm a fan of the industry. I'm a supply chain logistics nerd. So if anybody just wants to talk about experiences, just send me a note, give me a phone call, and we'll talk.
All right, very cool. And we'll put all that information on the newwarehouse.com as well. So, John, thank you for joining me today.
All right, thank you very much.
You've been listening to the New Warehouse Podcast with Kevin Lawton. Subscribe and check us out online at thenewwarehouse.com.
Thank you for listening to this episode. If you want more content from the New Warehouse, check out our new video series called All Hands on LinkedIn. Just search for the New Warehouse on LinkedIn and follow along.